want to stay. Well, that's great, but the band has to stop sometime. Eventually, they're gonna run out of code. Maybe you can stump me, but I couldn't think of one service that didn't require at least one of those conditions. Except game as a service. Hence, even on a conceptual level, they're not services. Here, I'll show you. Expectation of how long it lasts. Well, subscription games like World of Warcraft, yes, they win this round too, damn it. Subscription games really are services and they're not fraud. I'll have to get them on the phone. So besides those few games that still require a monthly fee to play, no, this doesn't apply. If there's an expectation of how long games as a service last, then what is it? The Calling 2 lasted a week and a half. Meridian 59 has been going on over 22 years. That's no help. Well, what do the games themselves tell you? Well, most don't tell you anything. They just say they can be shut down at any time for any reason. Some say they can be shut down at any time plus 30 days. Even then, I'd argue nobody buying the game is actually expecting it to stop working after 30 days. Now, I'd say there's no standard here, but that's not true. There is a standard for games. The traditional standard is forever. There are people who speedrun Super Mario Bros. That game's over 30 years old. So yeah, forever, that's a good standard. Games as a Service is trying to push a new standard, except it doesn't have one, just that it's less for you. Oh, except for The Secret World and Fallout 76. They're both saying you'll be able to play them forever. Okay. Well, for every other game as a service that doesn't last forever, this is a concrete example of how your rights are being taken away from you. We've gone from play forever to whatever the seller feels like. So no, this does not apply. Expectation of when it's done. Yeah, let me ask you, when is somebody done with a game? When they beat it? What if they want to play it again? What if it's a game that has no ending? It's just sort of an ongoing thing. What if they want to come back and play it after a few years? Exactly, there's no standard at all here. Well, no, that's not right either. There is a standard for games. The old standard used to be that you own the game, so you decide when you're done with it. And that's going to be different for every person. So no general standard. Yeah. Real world limitations. Okay, let me explain this one. Remember that body and brain analogy I made to the server and clients earlier? Well, the vast majority of video games throughout history have been sold with both the body and the brain. You got the whole package. So you can keep the game running as long as you want it. Now with the server and client model, they're set up so that the brain here needs maintenance by real people and computer hardware and electricity bills and so on. But that's a choice, not a necessity. See, at their core, video games are code. They're numbers. They don't wear out over time. The number 3 works just as well now as it did thousands of years ago. It just looks a little different. The containers that hold the data can wear out, but they can also be copied from one container to the next. So there's an infinite supply. Don't worry, we're not going to run out of numbers. They're always on tap. Now the server is usually maintained like a service while it's running, but once it's shut down, it could just be copied over here and someone else could get it running. Companies almost never do that, but the point is the limitation isn't real. It's artificial. Somebody made it up. They could just as easily undo it. In fact, it's easier to undo this rather than set this split up in the first place. Again, most games don't even have this limitation. It's not a perfect analogy, but imagine a natural park. You may pay to go there as a service, and there will be people maintaining the roads and trails, running a visitor center, etc. And that takes real resources. But if the park runs out of money and shuts down, the park doesn't cease to exist. The trees are still there. The mountains and rocks are all still there. We don't erect an indestructible dome around the park that allows nothing in or out and can survive a direct missile strike and then tell everyone with a lifetime pass that they can never enter the park again. But that's almost exactly how games as a service works. This is not a good standard. I hope one of these analogies is sticking. Anyway, the point to all that is that even without the law telling us what's what, games as a service are really not services. They're goods. So they should be treated as such. But hey, maybe you're saying they're a weird exception and should still be treated as services. Okay, why? I usually look at the law and rules from the perspective of what's the actual outcome. Well, the end outcome of most games as a service is that they're destroyed and can never be played again. Geez, that seems like a really high price to pay to treat them as services. Now you might be thinking, well, yeah, that sucks, but then we also get anti-cheat measures, stat tracking, matchmaking, easy updates, and See, that's the narrative talking. We can still have all that stuff and not destroy the game. The narrative likes to frame it like you can't have the good without the bad. That's what's known as a false dichotomy, and it's just wrong. It's like how you can simultaneously be for the circus coming to town, but against clowns stabbing people. I know that sounds impossible to some people, but it's not that hard a concept. Companies don't have to give up anything while they're supporting the game. It's only once they shut the game down that they need to stop treating them like a service and give the customers their goods. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but that's probably a bunch of work, right? Well, it can be, but I'm not an expert. So I talked to someone who is. I asked that developer who worked on a server emulator, how much work would it take for companies to provide the bare minimum to give users a reasonable chance to create a server emulator once the game shuts down? Well, he said there were two basic options. I'm not even going to go over these, but you can see them here. Now this would not be enough for a playable game. This would be more like those repair notes, like it was mentioned in those European planned obsolescence laws. But okay, this doesn't seem like too much work, so I asked him how long would it take the developers to do this. He said it depended on how well the game was written and how competent the developers are, but anywhere from less than an hour to a few days. Okay, so now let's compare. Here are the total pros and cons of having games as a service the way we do it now. Under pros, the developers save anywhere from less than an hour to a few days' work. All right, that's a positive. And under cons, everyone who paid for the game, along with anyone in the future interested in the game, will never be able to run it again. No, this doesn't seem like a good idea to me. In fact, this looks like a really bad deal for everyone. In order for this to be a good deal, I'd say we need a situation like the day after tomorrow, where these people are hiding in a library from the worst blizzard ever and need to burn some books so they stay warm and don't die. See, to me, that looks like a better trade-off for destroying media. I'm pretty sure games as a service doesn't save lives. Now, I understand if you think I'm framing this unfairly, because it sounds kind of crazy that this is the entire reason the industry is defrauding customers and destroying products with millions of dollars and thousands of hours of work behind them. But this is the only honest reason I've seen. It reminds me how in the 60s, auto manufacturers fought against seatbelts being mandatory, because even though they saved lives, they did cost some money, and automakers didn't want that. I won't lie, this does cost some money to do, but not much at all. I would guess well under 1% of the total budget. It's certainly cheaper than making a game a service to begin with. So even without the law, if this is the entire reason games are not preserved and customers can never use their products again, I don't find that particularly compelling. It's almost like if there are no laws on this, then there should be. And that brings me to the final argument, and this one I can even use on World of Warcraft. Finally. Now this may sound crazy considering the first half of this video, but I don't actually care about this topic because the industry is breaking the law. That's just a coincidence. I only cover that legal mess because there could be some real power behind that. I think the law is going to be the only way out of this, but that's not my main motivation here. No, I care because games as a service is destroying games. Quite successfully, too. Every once in a while, you'll hear people ask if games are art. I don't have an answer on that, but I think it's pretty clear games are creative experiences, often worthy of preservation. So I'll say art just to keep it simple. I mean, come on, if you're looking at stuff like this and are saying, no, this has no artistic value at all, you're just being grumpy. You know David Bowie's in a game, right? Anyway, the point here is that games as a service is more than just a consumer rights issue. Even though the quality ratio is debatable, games contain ideas, art, often dialogue, and ways of interacting that aren't present in any other medium. They're more than just products. If I buy a toaster that's designed to fail, well, I still think that's wrong, but I can always buy another toaster and still have toast. Whereas games are unique experiences. You can't replace them any more than you can replace books in a library with different authors. You can't replace Dracula with Twilight and say nothing was lost because they're both about vampires. It doesn't work that way. I'm not gonna spend much time explaining why saving art has value, because for me, it's innate. If you don't understand why art or creative works have value, I probably can't reach you on that. Maybe a philosopher can feel that one. For me, it's just an instinctive response. Now, of course, we can't save all artistic works. That's just not practical. There's too many. Plus, some of them suck. But we can decide for ourselves what's worth saving and what's not. Games as a service denies that chance to everyone. When I see a game with obvious creative value being destroyed, this is what comes to mind. Now, the reality is both better and worse than that. The part that's better is that games that are destroyed are far less likely to contain ideas that are so powerful some see them as a threat. The part that's worse is that publishers are way more successful at destroying games than oppressors ever were at destroying books. Or, at least within the past few thousand years. Even at book burning rounds, people didn't burn every existing copy of a book they hated. And yet, a lot of games as a service have a 100% death rate. There is no comparison to that in modern media. I guess in the early days of film, we lost a lot of stuff because the studios didn't know any better. That's what scares me. Now we do know better, and yet we're still going backwards. It's like watching a driver take a bus over a cliff, and he knows he's taking it over the cliff. It's a kind of madness. And speaking of modern media, you can rent movies or stream music as a service, but you can also buy them and keep them as goods. I guess some TV shows or radio shows you can't buy, but guess what? You can back them up yourself, legally. Not to dip back into the law again, but that's what this case was all about. Technically, it's already legal to back up games as a service in multiple countries, even in the USA. But if game companies make that impossible, then what does that matter? I care about reality, not fantasy rights. I want to say games as a service are the only form of modern media without real-world limitations that you cannot preserve. It's kind of amazing in a terrible way. And that's what this all comes down to for me. Even if games as a service passed every legal test, which it hasn't, then the law would be wrong. Games as a service, the way we do it now, permanently destroys games and all the work the creators put into them. It's entirely preventable and serves almost no purpose for anyone. It's just wrong. The whole point of laws is to have a more civilized society. Wanton destruction of art that others are trying to preserve and have paid for is not civilized. That's why this needs to stop, even for subscription games. We just have to stop it.
Stop it!
Stop it.
Stop it!